I love that this book didn't just make her fall in love with a man and that fixed her problems from her previously abusive relationship. Alright, hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, Jocelyn Rees, and today I'm going to be doing a video that I'm actually so excited for. The video is called New Adult Recommendations by Trope, and I'm excited. Like, I love new adult and I feel like I need to start incorporating it more in my channel, and I feel like this one is perfect because sometimes I want to find new adult books based on one specific trope, but also I don't always like to see videos just like with a whole bunch of books in one trope. Sometimes I just want to watch a new adult recommendations video that gives me lots of different tropes in one. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. So I have 2 books for each trope, and the first trope that I have is Marriage of Convenience. I just recently discovered that I like this trope, and since then I've read like maybe 3 or 4 books with it, and I kind of narrowed down which ones are my favorite. Okay, so the first book that I have for this trope is The Contract by Melanie Moreland, and this book was so good. I gave it 4 stars, but I did really enjoy it in the end, and I think this is a good one for this trope just because in this book, this trope itself was handled so well, and I felt like it developed so well throughout the story. So I definitely want to recommend this if you're looking for something to like satisfy your need to read this trope. So this book follows Richard Van Ryan. He's just a complete asshole, and his assistant Catherine, who's just a sweetheart. So that's another trope that's in here. We got the grump and the sunshine as well. And the book starts off with Richard being passed up for a promotion, and he's pissed. Like, he just wants to leave the company after this. He just feels like they're disrespecting him. They're disrespecting his work. He's not getting the shine that he should at this company. So he decides he wants to basically just fuck over the company and leave and go to their competing company. But the issue with the competing company is that it is very family oriented, and they want a specific type of person to work for them, and Richard does not fit this mold at all. So he's mean to his assistant. He has this reputation of being a playboy. He just basically has a reputation of having no emotion, which is the exact opposite that they want at this company. So he decides that he has to finesse. So in order to finesse, he decides that he needs to marry his assistant and come in as this new man who has been changed by love so that they will hire him. And his assistant is the perfect woman to pretend to marry just because she is the sunshine. She brings this warmth to the room, and it's believable that she could maybe change him. And she decides to go along with his plan just because she has a sickly family member, and he decides to pay her a lot of money in order for her to do this. And this book is just so well done. Like, there's some books where I really don't like the asshole main character just because like I just don't think he deserves to be with this woman in the end. And the author does a very good job of making the hero very self-aware, and like this development of self-awareness and kind of discovering why he acts the way he does and that his actions are not okay, as well as making it so that the heroine is not just there to better the hero. Like, she actually has a personality within herself, and she has goals within herself, and it just ended up being a very good execution of this trope, and I would highly recommend it. Okay, and the next book that I have is one that actually was very popular during 2019, but I have to put it on here because this might be my favorite book that this trope is in. This one is called Marriage for One by Ella Mays, and I adored this book, and I didn't think that I would for some reason. I don't know, the cover kind of threw me off. Usually I don't like no adult books with those types of covers. I like the fixer up cover, the hating game, and you know what, I need to stop using covers to decide if I like a book or not because I love this one. So this book follows Jack and Rose, which is adorable and kind of tragic within itself because literally the names from the Titanic, like, kind of genius. I liked it a lot. So yeah, it follows Jack and Rose, and the book starts off with Jack inviting Rose into his office as Jack is a lawyer, and Rose is there for a completely different meeting. She doesn't even know Jack, but he starts off with the book with Jack bringing her into his office and basically proposing to her out of nowhere. But he pulls her in there, and he basically explains that in the meeting that she's about to go into, she's going to find out that in the will of her dead uncle, she is not promised the property that he initially promised her because she is not engaged anymore. She had recently broken it off with her fiance, and a clause in his will was that in order for her to get the property, she had to be married or engaged. The property was going to her husband, not her. Jack basically proposes to her in order to be her husband so that he gets the property and he'll rent it out to her for 2 years. She wants the property as well, so she's willing to take those 2 years that he's offering her. So they end up getting married, and they start like getting to know each other and going to like Jack's work events together. And he comes to Rose's bakery, which is what she decides to do with the property, and kind of like helps her there. And it's just literally so adorable. We get Jack, who is this, I love the broody main character, but like Jack is a broody main character where he's not really an asshole. He's more just private into himself. He doesn't really want to open up to Rose, but he's not rude or like disrespectful to her, which I really like. It can be really hit or miss for me when the love interest is disrespectful to the woman. So yeah, I like that he wasn't necessarily disrespectful. He was just very closed off and he didn't want to get close to her. The development in the romance was everything, and don't get me wrong, this is a slow burner, which I usually do not love slow burn, but the way this was done, just the tension between them and me rooting for them to get together, I just ended up really enjoying it. Okay, so the next trope that I have is my all-time fave. Like this, I know I said I love the last one, it's one of my favorite, but this is my all-time favorite trope, and it is hate to love. So the first book that I have is Someday Someday by Emma Scott, and this one is also a male-to-male romance, but I also want to mention trigger warnings for addiction and conversion therapy, or like mentions of conversion therapy. So yeah, this book follows Max Kaufman and Silas Marsh, and Max is a nurse who goes to like NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and kind of speaks there. And Silas Marsh is a very rich like entrepreneur. His family is very rich in like the pharmaceutical business, who also goes to these NA meetings. So they meet with Max at the NA meeting, giving stories about his life and kind of just talking about his battle with addiction and his struggles. And Silas is kind of sitting in the back listening, but he's very like anonymous. He has this hood up. He doesn't really want people to recognize him, but Max meets his eye from where he's speaking, and they kind of have this connection, and Silas kind of disappears after that, and Max doesn't expect to see him again, except this is a romance story. He sees him again, and Max ends up getting this job as a nurse for a very wealthy man who he doesn't really know. Obviously, it ends up being Silas's dad. And this book is not exactly like hate to love, like in your face, but it's hate to love in the way that Silas decides to hate Max in order to hide his feelings for Max, and it's just done so well. The topic of addiction is handled very carefully, as well as the topic of conversion therapy was handled carefully in the way that the character who experienced that was not immediately healed after getting in a relationship with a male. This one is called Hate Notes, and it's by V. Keelan and Penelope Ward, and oh my gosh, hate to love excellence. Like this one is so good. This book basically starts off with our main character going to a secondhand store to sell her wedding dress because she is not getting married, and while she's there she finds another wedding dress that she just completely falls in love with, and she tries it on, and when she tries it on she finds a note on the inside, and the note is basically a love letter to the bride, and she basically just falls in love with the letter and the guy, and she just thinks that he is everything. And so she goes home and she gets pretty drunk because she's still like mourning her loss of her wedding, and when she wakes up she discovers that she has set an appointment to view this apartment, and when she goes through her memories she discovers that this guy is basically the owner of the apartment that she's going to go look at. And so when she goes to the apartment, the guy starts reading out some of the things that she wrote in her application, and they're just like very weird things. He basically just rants at her because he's annoyed at her for wasting his time. And while she's crying in the bathroom, an old woman comes up to her and offers her a job. Very odd, very weird, but the old woman sees herself in the main character, and so she offers her a job, and the main character decides to take it. And when she gets to her job the next day, she finds who other than the guy who berated her, and the two end up having to work together a lot, and they kind of have this hate for each other. They both don't like each other. He thinks that she's so goofy and kind of just like outrageous, like he doesn't like her, and she doesn't like him because she feels like he's too serious and he's very rude. And so they end up having to work together and kind of work through this hate that they have for each other. And so the girl main character was literally just so funny, and the guy was funny as well, and it was funny to see them work together and him starting to have this attraction for this girl that he thought was completely ridiculous, that he didn't want to have a relationship with, and him trying to like fight his attraction, and that tension between the two was so good. My next trope is actually best friends to lovers. And the first book that I have in this category is A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. And this is one that I've been meaning to get to for years, and I finally got to it at the end of 2019, and I obviously loved it. So this book follows a girl named Breck who goes by B, and a boy that she met in high school. And the moment she saw him, she didn't fall in love, but she really had a strong attraction to him, and she had this kind of pull to want to get to know him. But unfortunately her best friend kind of jumped in, and he had eyes for her best friend after that. And so he becomes kind of integral in her life, and they end up having a lot of experiences together in high school because of how he was with her best friend. And they become best friends because of how much time they spend together. So they get really close, and the lines kind of start to blur, especially after the boy and B's best friend break up. Except he's 1 year older than her, so he goes away to college, and she expects that to basically be the end of them. Except when she goes to college herself, she finds that he goes to the same college. And they start that back and forth relationship again this time, except this time she has a boyfriend, so they can't be together. So it becomes kind of a cycle of that, of them meeting each other over the years, except something is always in the way of them being together, and it's honestly such slow burn, such angst. Like, oh my gosh, like you literally can start like screaming at the book like, oh my gosh, just get together already. Like it becomes like annoying, but it's not annoying in the sense that like I hated the book. I was just like impatient, like I just wanted them to be together. The next book that I have is kind of like the same exact synopsis. Like it's actually kind of crazy, except instead of meeting in high school, these two meet when they're adults, but it's the same type of sense where this time the girl has a boyfriend and the guy that she ends up being her best friend is her boyfriend's best friend. So it's actually kind of crazy. Now I feel bad for putting both of these on here because they are basically the same book, but I love them both individually. And in the second book that I'm going to mention, I actually ended up enjoying the characters and enjoying their romance, but it was the same type of angsty, they can't be together, they have the back and forth type of thing as well. But I just like them both. So this one is called The Pact and it's by Karina Hall or Holly. Like I said, I love her writing. I've been reading her a lot on Kindle Unlimited, but this book is legit almost the same exact synopsis as A Letter to Whiskey, except in this one they don't meet each other over the years and have this kind of back and forth. This time they're always in each other's life. They don't have to meet each other again, but there's always something in the way of them getting together. But also in this book, the main characters make a pact together that if neither of them is married by the age of 30, then they have to get married to each other. So yeah, there's not much different than me to explain than the Love Letter to Whiskey, but this one was also really good. The characters themselves had a lot more personality to me than A Love Letter to Whiskey. A Love Letter to Whiskey is written very whimsical, like lots of metaphors, like whiskey is literally the boy. This was more quirky, very funny, very sex positive. And yeah, sorry that I gave you two that are basically the same book, but they're different and I love them both in individual ways. Okay, and the final trope that I have for you guys is slow burn. Slow burn is not my favorite trope. I really don't like it at all because I just want the characters to be together and I'm an impatient person. But I have a few slow burn that I actually love, and I know a lot of people love slow burn, so I wanted to include it in here. Okay, so the first book that I have is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. That was my first Mariana Zapata book that I've ever read, and she knocked it out of the park. It was the first slow burn that I actually read and I actually enjoyed, and I didn't feel as impatient with this one. So this book follows a girl named Vanessa who is an assistant for this famous football player who is known as the Wall of Winnipeg because literally people can't get through him because he is this wall in football. And he is one of the hardest people to work for because he wants everything particular. He's just a very hard boss. And Vanessa feels like she's not appreciated by him. He never says thank you to her. And one day she just gets so sick of it, she just quits. And she's like, I'm not going to work for him anymore. And he finds a life where he doesn't have her and he realizes how hard that actually is and how hard she actually worked for him. And he kind of shows up on her doorstep and like begs her to come back. She says no the first time and then he starts to come back. He keeps coming back to ask her to come back. And it just changes the relationship between the two because obviously what made her go away was him being so harsh and rude and being ungrateful. And so the relationship between them twists because he wants her to come back and she realized in that sense he was grateful in a way, and it just starts this really slow burn relationship between the two. So the last final book that I have for slow burn that was actually my favorite romance book of 2019 was The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. This is the only one that I own physically because it's the only one that I didn't read that was on Kindle Unlimited. There you go. So this book starts off with one woman having broken up with her boyfriend. He broke up with her and she was living in his apartment for a while, but one day he comes into the apartment and he brings this woman in and she decides it's time for her to get the fuck out of there. So she's looking for flats, but she doesn't have that much money, so she's looking for something pretty cheap and she sees a flyer from a man. Sorry, this is bothering me with my ring light, so I'm just gonna put it down. But she ends up finding this flyer from a man who wants to basically share his flat. It's only a 1-bedroom flat, but he wants to share it in the sense that she will live there during the night and then he'll live there during the day with their different work shifts. And she decides to take it because it's pretty much the best bet that she can get for her money. And they basically communicate through these post-it notes and index cards, and they end up really getting to know each other. And it comes to the point where they become really good friends, and from there they go into lover territory, and I thought this was so well done. Okay, this does have a trigger warning for the mention of an abusive relationship as well as kind of police, not brutality, but like police corruption. And I just adored it. I loved the discussion of the abusive relationship. Like, I did not want to pick up this book initially because of the idea of the abusive relationship. I just didn't think it was something that I would want to read about. But the way in which this woman went through her progression of becoming not okay with the abusive relationship that she was in previously, but kind of just like overcoming what that relationship did to her and realizing that she needs therapy and things like that. Just the incorporation of therapy and realizing that a man is not going to fix a woman who has been in an abusive relationship. I love that this book didn't just make her fall in love with a man and that fixed her problems from her previously abusive relationship. Okay, so those are all the books that I have for you guys today in this recommendations video. I hope you found some that you're actually interested in, And yeah, all my links are down below, Goodreads, things like that, if you want to keep up with me there. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!